Truly honored and privileged to be able to acquaint you with the work and career of a longtime colleague and friend, Dr. Mike Hout, a fellow Irish American from flyover country. I grew up in Buffalo. Mikey grew up in Pittsburgh, okay? Okay. Mike works mostly on social change, inequality, social mobility, education policy, and demography. He uses top-end quantitative methods. His research is attuned to the importance of the question, not the method, ever. And this is just so refreshing. Mike is trained as a sociologist, but he's infinitely multidisciplinary. When my good friend Robert Moffat, the editor of the American Economic Review, thought he saw something fishy in one of his lead articles, he said, well, we need some commentary on this from somebody who knows something about occupational and social mobility. So he invited Mike to write a comment on the lead article. It was fully refereed by a whole bunch of economists and whatever. But if you read Mike, you learned what was going on in terms of occupational and social mobility since 1850 in the United States and England. So it was really lovely. Once having been a garden variety economist myself in the mid-1980s, I met this guy, Mike Hout, who I never heard of at a PSID board meeting. None of the other economists seemed to know him either, as those were the days when multidisciplinarity was still in the closet, at least even in social sciences, Jen, okay? Within 30 minutes, I and everyone else knew that this guy really knows his stuff on survey methodology and topical survey issues. Of course, Mike had long been co-principal investigator of the General Social Survey and had used it to study occupational hierarchies and social mobility since '72. But back then, economists didn't pay much attention to sociologists. That was our problem. I mean, in terms of John, this is a guy, right? He isn't going to kill the evidence. He's going to enrich it, okay? He's going to interpret it. He's going to expand it, and he's going to let it speak. This is the exact antithesis of the guy you were talking about today. I sure hope all those adjectives and adverbs that you had make it in the annals, I'll tell you. Mike's work provides a clear picture of major social patterns and processes in the scope of history. He was a historian as an undergrad. He's really a social demographer and sociologist with a broad lens and a historical intuition, not one who writes little papers about X and Y. He writes big papers. And he doesn't mince words, so you learn right away what the hell's going on. He is without a doubt my favorite sociologist, with the exception of my wife, Marcy Carlson. But she also thinks Mike walks on water. And we aren't the only ones who think so, okay? Mike's honors include election to the AAAS in '97, the National Academy of Sciences in 2003, American Philosophical Society in 2006. He and Bob had these little red spring flowers on. That's how you could tell the philosophers in our midst, okay? He's been the chair of the National Academy of Sciences Standing Committee in the American Opportunity Study, an inquiry into the long-term trends in social mobility. He's been a long-time member of the CNSTAT, advising the nation's statistical community, and now he's the chairman of the Division Committee on Behavioral and Social Sciences, okay? That's the committee that decides what the hell social sciences could be doing, okay? And it had other guys who were its former heads, like some guy named Pruitt and some guy named Neil Smelser. So this is a big job, and Mike can do it. Honorary degrees, visiting scholar gigs at the Russell Sage Foundation and University College Dublin, Guggenheim's. He's got 3 pages of people he's mentored, including my colleague Ted Gerber, Alicia Saperstein, tons of amazingly good social scientists, and he's done a wonderful job. His books include Century of Difference with Claude Fisher, Truth About Conservative Christians. Yes, he wrote about that with Andrew Greeley, a lovely Irish Catholic priest and also academic. Inequality by Design, and so forth and so on. The American Sociological Association population section gave him the Otis Dunkley Duncan Award for Century of Difference, and he was awarded the Population Associated of America's Clifford Clogg Memorial Award, and now he's getting to see the Robert Hauser somebody. He can tell you about that, the ASA. So Mike writes about religion, morals, money, social attitudes, immigration, entrepreneurship, Irish Americans, educational mobility, segregation, the realignment of presidential voting. Is that wide enough, or do you want me to go wider, okay? He's often ahead of his time, so in 1982 he wrote a book about the importance of assortative mating, which is now a whole field. In other words, doctors marrying doctors, not nurses, and so forth and so on. He wrote a wonderful overview of what we know about social mobility in Annals 2015. You should read that. You can really learn a lot there, more than you could spend 3 times as much reading somebody else. And from Mike, you learn things like the following. He and I have both said this many times before. If you want to know about rising inequality, figure out who owns the robots. That's who's getting ahead, okay? And when you look at social and economic outcomes from education, it should never be A and above, because it's all above the BA. That's where all the action is, okay? I could go on, but enough for now. Quite appropriately, Mike is the 2018 David Riesman Scholar. Riesman was a lawyer by training and a sociologist, and he offered a nuanced and complicated portrait of the nation's social classes and their changing nature in the post-World War II era, including the role of higher education and social mobility. Riesman worked with Sandy Jenks, Nate Glazer, Pat Moynihan, and other giants of his era. Of course, he was a Harvard guy, this guy. But I am only proud to say that I've had a chance or two to work with Mike Hout, another giant of this era. So Mike, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Academy this year as our 2018 David Riesman Fellow. It'll be trouble. So. Yeah, we need that. You don't need that trouble. There. Okay. How's you looking? There you go. It weighs a bunch. Welcome to the club, Mikey.
We gotta get the photo.
Photo.
It doesn't happen until it's in the photo. All right, I have a few remarks. There's 2 guys in the whole world who call me Mikey. Tim and a guy named Lou Fulminante, who's the doorman of my building. And Tim's not the one who looks like a professional wrestler. So I'm really deeply honored to be chosen as the 3rd David Riesman Fellow. Riesman was, as Tim said, one of the giants of 1950s and 60s sociology who achieved not only academic distinction, but lasting impact a generation before the term public sociology or public sociologist got its current meaning. And I had the pleasure of meeting Riesman only once, but he was famously gracious, and that was my experience with it. And I was thrilled to meet him because what I knew, aside from personal experience about American higher education, I'd learned from Academic Revolution, which was the book that he and Sandy Jenks wrote. I only had a few minutes, but it was really, really quite wonderful. His famous book was called The Lonely Crowd. Riesman contrasted the worldview of inner-directed and other-directed individuals and argued that shifts in the economy and geography, were transforming the United States from a nation of inner-directed producers, I'm a farmer, I'm a miner, I'm a professor, to a nation of other-directed consumers. I'm a latte-drinking Volvo driver. He didn't actually use those phrases, but that was the gist of it. That's my translation update. Or a NASCAR lover with a gun rack in the back of my pickup truck. Suburbanization was the dynamic element of this other direction. In a landscape of cookie-cutter suburbs, you got distinctions from what you bought or from what you parked in your driveway. I follow my NYU colleague Paul DiMaggio and my frequent collaborator Claude Fisher as David Riesman Fellows. Ironically, these guys made their name by saying what was wrong with the lonely crowd. Paul's new institutionalism addressed other directedness of organizations, and he coined the famous phrase institutional isomorphism, which, is as an academic, we really want to have those kinds of phrases associated with our name. But more importantly, Claude Fisher's subcultures of urbanism took sociology back downtown, uncovering new forms of critical difference and differentiation in the central city. Place mattered for Claude, too. The geography was important, but the scale and density of our cities was really where nonconformists were sheltered and could find one another. This was before the internet. For my part, I'm of course more aligned with Riesman's work on higher education, and a lot of my work has that flavor. I didn't even realize this was the theme for tonight, but I want to emphasize the multidisciplinary strength of the American Academy. In the academic revolution, Riesman and Jenks faulted the siloing of America's universities and looked for ways to overcome it. And journals like the Annals and institutions like this, and Russell Sage Foundation and a few others, and every other year the NIH, are interested in getting us out of our silos. And that's a really important bit of work. Today, Tim, an economist, introduced me, a sociologist, and as he pointed out, we met eons ago at a committee meeting. And over the many years, we sat together at conferences in Madison and all around the country and talked about stuff we might do. And this summer, or actually it was last winter, we actually wrote something together. And it won't appear in the Annals. It's going to come out somewhere else, the RSF Journal. All right, and Tim's not, Tim's exceptional in many ways, but his crossing over and marrying into sociology isn't the only, it doesn't make him the only one. I think this room is full of people who have done this kind of work, and I really am particularly honored not just to be part of an organization that included David Riesman at one time, included my friends and collaborators, but also includes all of you who represent this spirit of interdisciplinary cooperation and collaboration, and it's a real honor to be part of it. Thank you.